Next week marks 2 years since 10 people were killed at a King Soopers in Boulder. Now the son of one of the victims is suing the company that made the suspect's gun, Ruger.
Now our 9 News legal analyst Whitney Traylor is here to explain this case just a little bit more for us. And Whitney, in the past, it seems like it's kind of been a little bit harder to sue gun manufacturers and the distributors.
Yeah, it's been tough, and that's because of a 2005 federal law that essentially immunized gun manufacturers and distributors from being liable. So essentially they're saying, look, you guys make them, but what people do with them, you're not going to be liable. And that has been airtight. It's been really a challenge to get over that. And so that's why you don't see a lot of gun manufacturer lawsuits until really Sandy Hook, I think, is the real exception there.
That's the one that I was going to bring up because I think, a lot of people think back to the families that sued. I think it was Remington.
Yes.
And there was a huge settlement in that case.
That's exactly right. And that case was interesting because what they did was to get around this 2005 law, they sued on a state law arguing antitrust and consumer protection issues, and they said they violated their fair advertising. And the reason was some of the things that Remington was saying was consider your man card reissued. They marketed one weapon that would used in killing human beings. They said their weapon would allow a single individual to outnumber his opponents and force them to bow down. And so what they were saying with that is that you're marketing it to these young, essentially white males who are going out and committing these mass shootings. And that was a big issue in terms of should their marketing materials come out during discovery and all that, because they were trying to keep it private, if you will. So that was the case where, and they ultimately settled for $73 million.
We know that there are a handful of bills right now being considered at the state capitol. How is that going to impact this case if any of those should pass?
Well, there are a number, and I looked this morning to see where they are, and they're at just various stages in the Colorado legislature, but some of them are dealing with a 3-day waiting period, raising the age to 21, and then of course they I think just started the introduction of a complete assault weapon ban, which I think is going to be a hard road to toe. And then, of course, there's language addressing this very issue in terms of gun manufacturers. So they are trying to actually codify essentially what they did up in Connecticut and say, here's the language in putting gun manufacturers on the hook, which is going to lead to a ton of litigation.
So the alleged suspect in this case has not gone to trial yet. Again, it's been almost 2 years, and it's because of his mental status. Do you think that we'll ever get to a trial?
Maybe not, because he's been deemed to be incompetent to stand trial, I think, because of schizophrenia and other diagnoses. And so that's one of our constitutional rights, is that you have to understand the proceedings to stand trial. And they're saying he won't. And if he doesn't, he's in a secured mental facility that he'll remain there until unless he's deemed competent at some point. So they will periodically have these competency hearings in front of the judge to determine that.
Let me put you on the spot a little bit.
Okay.
Just what should people be expecting next? Where do we begin in this process?
In the process of the gun?
Correct.
Yeah, I think the process, I think it starts with the legislature. That's going to be a starting place, because when you look at it, they're saying, particularly with the 3-day waiting period, that will prevent a number of suicides in addition to homicides. And so there's a lot of pushback, but right now we have we have a Democrat controlled government, essentially, so some of these bills are going to be pushed through.
Whitney, as always, thank you. I'm sure we'll revisit this as time goes on.
Sure thing. Good to be here.